Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loayza.
Welcome back to Award-winning Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network. I'm your host, Rick Loayza, and this is the podcast where we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. We are bringing old school basketball to a new school audience. And today we bring you the story of the early professional micro leagues. And when I say micro leagues, I mean entire basketball leagues that existed within a single city. Now, the time frame that we are talking about goes all the way back to the late 1800s and very early 1900s. The game of basketball had been invented in 1891 in Massachusetts, which is in the very northeastern part of the United States. So naturally, the game grew most quickly in that part of the country and spread out from there. So these early professional micro leagues were in the northeastern cities like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and even other smaller cities like Albany, New York, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Springfield, Massachusetts. These micro leagues began around 1898 and went on for about 10 years before the league started to grow in size and distance and become regional leagues. Now, I think it is actually quite incredible that a game that was only invented in 1891 was already organizing professional leagues by 1898. That is only 7 years from invention to professional leagues, and that is incredibly fast. Now, most of these leagues were more like adult recreation leagues. These were not anything even resembling modern professional basketball. The guys that played in these leagues had day jobs. There were no full-time professionals. They were part-timers at best. They would spend the day working in a factory or something like that and then play games at night or on weekends. But what made them professional is that they would get paid for playing. Now, we are not talking about big money. This was more like a side hustle for these players. They were getting maybe $10 per game at best, or in some cases, they would just split whatever they took in from the ticket sales. These players probably made only enough money in a single game to buy groceries for a few days. It is not like today where a guy like Steph Curry makes enough money from a single game to buy a large house. But if it were not for these leagues, then the NBA today would not be what it is. Everything has a beginning, and these early micro leagues were the proving ground that showed that people would be willing to pay to watch other people play basketball. This is the basketball version of a baby taking his first steps. Like I said, everything starts somewhere, and this is where professional basketball got started, with these micro leagues. So it's worth taking a deep dive into their history. The structure of these leagues was a loose collection of teams that were put together by themselves. In other words, the players would usually just form their own teams, give themselves a name, join a league, and start playing. In many cases, these teams were formed by groups of friends from the local YMCA, and they would often play teams from other YMCAs. In some cases, the teams were made up of friends who grew up on the same block or went to the same high school together. In other cases, the teams would be formed by young single guys who all lived in the same settlement house. Some of these teams were made up of immigrants from the same country, or the working poor who needed the extra money that came from playing basketball. So I think you get the idea. These teams were loosely formed and loosely connected to make a league. Now, this is how small these leagues were. The state of Massachusetts had 2 leagues. They had a league called the New England Basketball League that lasted from 1903 all the way to 1904. It was based in and around the city of Boston. Then on the western side of the state was the Western Massachusetts Basketball League, which was based in and around Springfield, Massachusetts. And I have made the drive from Boston to Springfield, and it only took me 90 minutes. That is how close these cities are to each other. But back then, that was far enough away from each other that each city had its own league. Now, my 12-year-old son plays competitive soccer or international football, and we will sometimes drive as far away as 300 miles to play games. Of course, today we have modern cars and highways, which they did not have yet in the late 1800s and very early 1900s. The city of Philadelphia actually had 2 leagues. One One was for the teams located in Philadelphia proper, and then the second league was made up of the teams that surrounded Philadelphia. And they did the same thing in Pittsburgh, where they had one league for the city of Pittsburgh and the second league for the teams that surrounded Pittsburgh. But if I took you in a time machine all the way back to 1898 to watch one of these games, it would look nothing like modern professional basketball. First of all, there would be very few tall players playing professionally in those early days. Nutrition back then was not what it is today, so very few people grew to any sort of significant height. And the people that did grow that tall were typically not very athletic or coordinated. When you watched a professional game from 1900, most all of the players would have been around 5'10" or 178 centimeters, and the game was a lot rougher. The fouls that these guys dished out would have made the bad boys Pistons blush. If you ever see photos of these early teams, you will notice that many of them wore leather knee pads and sometimes elbow pads. The early game was incredibly physical. There was no such thing as a technical foul or flagrant foul. It made sense from a strategic perspective that if you were going to foul an opponent, you might as well try to take his head off, because either way, the team being fouled would just take the ball out of bounds and throw it back in. Free throws were not a thing in basketball yet, so the consequences for committing a hard foul were minimal. Imagine the kind of fouls you would see in the NBA today if you could clothesline an opponent and the only consequence is that the team that was fouled had to take the ball out on the side. It would become a free-for-all with hard fouls going both ways. Well, that is what it was like for those players back then. The kinds of fouls that these guys were committing in 1900 would have been classified as assault if they happened in the street instead of inside of a gym. Well, this is a good place to take a break, and I'll be right back with more on the early professional microleagues.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.
Hello, sports history fans. I'm Ross from the podcast Pigskin Tales. You're about to jump into another thrilling sports history moment, but first, let's dive into today's sponsor, just in time for the holiday season. Introducing Art of Words, the brainchild of word artist Dan Duffy from Philadelphia. Dan meticulously crafts stunning images by handwriting relevant words from some of the greatest sports moments in time. These unique budget-friendly illustrations are the perfect gift, sparking cherished memories and capturing hearts. Choose from city skylines, sports, history, and musicians to find a piece for everyone. And here's the exciting part. For that sports fanatic in your life, gift them a piece of their favorite team or player's history. Art of Words tells a compelling story. Explore collegiate stadiums, each meticulously crafted with every football victory etched into words. Or venture into baseball stadiums, handwritten with every player from the team's illustrious history. My favorite on the site is Bryce Harper 2021 MVP year. Because I'm a big stats guy, I think that's one of the coolest things ever. Check it out. Don't wait. Order a print today for yourself and your loved one this holiday season. Transform your wall into a gallery of captivating art and surprise your family and friends with a print of their own. Use code SHN15 at artofwords.com for a 15% discount on your order in November and December. Visit Art of Words, where words magically transform into stunning art, evoking cherished memories and touching the hearts of those who you care about. Again, use the code SHN15 for 15% off at artofwords.com.
Welcome back to the show, and let us continue with the early professional micro leagues. Just before the break, we shared how the fouls back then were practically barbaric. These guys were going for blood back in the early 1900s. And another distinctive of these early leagues was the innovation, as everyone was still trying to understand the basic rules and how to exploit them for an advantage. And they took advantage of a loophole in the rules discovered by the Yale University basketball team. The loophole was this: they were dribbling the basketball. See, back in those early days, the rule said that a player could not run while holding the ball, and that is still the rule today. So the way around this rule was to bounce the ball as you moved around the court. That way, the player could move without carrying the ball. Once this move was seen in Connecticut, it quickly spread to other colleges and to the professional ranks. As players began to use the dribble more frequently, some guys started to display an extreme amount of skill, but they could not dribble for too long or start crossing over a defender. That is because the ball was not smooth all the way around. If you have ever seen an American football, then you know that there are laces on one side of the ball. Back in the old days, these laces were necessary as they were needed to lace up the ball in order to keep the air bladder safely inside. Today, American footballs no longer need the laces from a practical perspective, but they are still there because they help the quarterback with throwing the ball. Now, back in the early 1900s, basketballs also had laces on one side, and if you bounced the ball with the laces down, the ball could easily take off on you. The ball could go anywhere, and it often did. That is why most players did not take more than 2 or maybe 3 dribbles at the very most and then pass the ball or shoot it. They had to be careful with bouncing the ball with the laces up so that the bounce was more predictable. And these were some of the innovations of those early leagues. It was an unusual time for basketball. New ideas were popping up everywhere. Some ideas stuck, and some ideas disappeared. But the game was so new that nearly everyone was trying to come up with a new way of playing the game that would give them an advantage. Around 1910, when the game was coming up on its 20th anniversary, the micro leagues started to give way to the regional leagues. So the leagues began to develop larger footprints. And this happened for one simple reason: travel became easier. Newer and more reliable railroads were connecting cities like never before, and with the development of the automobile, it became easier to drive from one city to another. So Massachusetts no longer needed 2 leagues. Due to easier travel, they could have just 1 league. Then you started to see situations where, let's say, the best team from Boston might drive down to New York City to take on the best team from there. That type of travel slowly became more common, and the regional leagues took over the professional basketball landscape. But the regional leagues are a story for another day. The micro leagues had their place in the development of basketball, and you can think of these micro leagues during the first 20 years of the game's existence as the toddler phase. Basketball was just learning how to walk and then run. The game was developing so quickly, and new ideas were tried almost every day, and it was tough growth, but good growth. If not for these early players pushing the game forward, we would not be where we are today. These early players laid a foundation for what we have in today's NBA and other professional leagues. And we should be thankful to those early pioneers of professional basketball who proved that the game was entertaining enough for people to be willing to pay money to buy a ticket. Well, that is it for us. Join us next week when we share the story of when Michael Jordan lost a game of one-on-one to a basketball executive. That's next time on Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com to find out more about this and other sports history podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And check out our page on Facebook. It's called Basketball History 101 Podcast. There you will find shorter historical posts as well as comments and discussion starters on today's game. I'll also announce there when new episodes come out. I want to thank my producer and editor, Jacob Loayza. Join us each week as we continue to mine the history of basketball for more great stories from the past. Take care and see you soon.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and we're able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.